The raging waters crashed against the lonely farmhouse as Josie Novak clung to the rafters, her auburn hair plastered to her pale face, watching helplessly as the flood consumed everything she had built over the last 3 years. The once peaceful tributary of the Colorado River had transformed into a monstrous force that showed no mercy, not to her small farm, not to her dreams, and certainly not to a widow trying to make it on her own in the Arizona Territory of 1879. "Please, God," she whispered, her trembling fingers wrapped around the wooden beam. "Just let me survive this." The roar of the water drowned out her prayers as another section of the roof threatened to give way. Josie had never felt so utterly alone. At 24, she had already endured more than most women twice her age, losing her husband to pneumonia last winter, struggling to maintain the small homestead on the outskirts of Nogales, and now watching helplessly as nature reclaimed everything she had fought to keep. The waters had risen so quickly. One moment she was securing the chicken coop against the spring storm, and the next, a wall of brown water was rushing across her property. She'd barely made it to the roof of her home before the first floor disappeared beneath the murky torrent. 3 days now she had been stranded, the floodwaters showing no signs of receding. Her food, a small bundle she'd grabbed in her desperate escape, was gone. The spring rain continued to fall, sometimes in sheets, sometimes in a gentle patter that seemed to mock her dire situation. She was cold, hungry, and beginning to lose hope that anyone would find her before the rest of the house gave way. When dawn broke on the 4th day, Josie's eyes were gritty from exhaustion and tears. The rain had finally stopped, but the waters still swirled angrily below, carrying debris from upstream branches, parts of other structures, and remnants of lives disrupted. In the distance, she could see the tops of trees and the occasional roofline, but no sign of other survivors. Then she saw it, a dark speck moving against the muddy current. At first, she thought it was just another piece of debris, but as it drew closer, she realized it was something else entirely. A raft, and on it, standing tall with a long pole to guide it, was a man. "Hello." She called, her voice cracking from disuse and thirst. "Help, over here." The figure changed course, maneuvering the makeshift raft with remarkable skill through the swirling waters. As he approached, Josie could see that he was tall, with broad shoulders and a determined set to his jaw beneath several days' worth of stubble. A cowboy hat was pulled low over his eyes, and his clothes, though soaked, still bore the unmistakable look of a man who worked the range. "Madam," he called back, his voice deep and steady, "I'm going to get you down from there. Just hold on." When the raft bumped against what remained of her porch, Josie could see him clearly. His eyes were the same color as the sky after a storm, a clear, piercing blue that stood out against his sun-darkened skin. "I'm Cole Vickers," he said simply, extending a hand toward her. "Been making my way downriver, checking for survivors. You're the first I've found today." "Josie Novak," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been up here for days." Cole assessed the situation with a practiced eye. "That roof won't last much longer. We need to get you onto the raft now." He secured his craft with a rope to what remained of her porch column, then carefully made his way toward her, testing each step on the waterlogged structure. When he reached her, she was shaking so badly she could barely move. "I can't," she began, fear freezing her in place. "You can," he said firmly, his eyes never leaving hers. "I won't let you fall." Something in his steady gaze gave Josie courage. She nodded and allowed him to help her to her feet, wincing at the pain in her stiff muscles. "Easy now," he murmured, guiding her across the treacherous rooftop. When they reached the edge, he lifted her as though she weighed nothing and carefully lowered her onto the raft. It wobbled beneath them, but held steady in the current. Once they were both aboard, Cole untied the rope and used his pole to push away from the house. Just in time, with a sickening crack, another section of the roof collapsed into the floodwaters. "My home," Josie whispered, watching as the structure that had sheltered her began to disintegrate. Cole guided the raft a safe distance away before turning to her. We salvage what we can, he said, his voice gentle but matter of fact. That's all any of us can do. Looking around at the raft, Josie realized it was constructed of barn doors lashed together with rope, with crates secured to the surface. In one corner sat a canvas bag, presumably containing supplies. "Where are we going?" she asked, wrapping her arms around herself against the chill. "Higher ground," Cole replied, focusing on navigating the swirling current. "There's a relief camp being set up near the foothills. Army's there along with some folks from town. Nogales, is it?" "Half underwater," he confirmed grimly. "But the eastern side of town sits higher. Most people got out in time." Josie nodded, trying to absorb this information. "My animals?" she asked, already knowing the answer. Cole's expression softened. "I'm sorry, madam, I didn't see any livestock when I approached." Tears welled in Josie's eyes, but she blinked them back. Crying wouldn't help now. "Thank you for coming," she said instead. I thought I was going to die up there." "Been checking every building I can reach," he explained, skillfully steering them around a floating tree trunk. "Made this raft 3 days ago when my horse and I got caught by the rising water. Had to let him go, he swam for higher ground. Smart animal, he'll find me later." As they traveled, Cole occasionally stopped the raft to inspect partially submerged structures. Once, he maneuvered close to a floating dresser, retrieving a waterlogged photograph in a wooden frame before the current carried it away. "What are you doing?" Josie asked. "Salvaging," he replied, carefully placing the photograph in a crate. "Memories matter. People will want these things when the waters recede." Josie watched as he collected a child's doll, a family Bible, and a metal lockbox, all carried by the floodwaters. Each item was treated with care as though it were made of glass. "You don't have to do that," she said softly. Cole looked at her directly, his blue eyes serious. "Yes, I do. When you lose everything, even the smallest things become precious." Something about his words and the gentle way he handled each item touched Josie deeply. This man understood loss in a way few others would. As the day wore on, the sun emerged, warming their sodden clothes. Cole offered Josie jerky and a canteen of water from his supplies. She ate gratefully, realizing how weak she'd become. "You been out here alone all this time?" Cole asked as he pulled them through a stand of half-submerged cottonwoods. Josie nodded. "Since my husband died last winter. We came out from Missouri 3 years ago. Thomas had dreams of raising horses." She looked out at the flooded landscape. "This land was supposed to be our future." Cole was quiet for a moment. "Land's still there under all this water. It'll be there when the flood recedes." "I don't know if I can start over again," she admitted. "Not alone. One day at a time, Mrs. Novak," he said. "That's all any of us can do." "Josie," she corrected. "Please call me Josie." He nodded, the hint of a smile touching his lips. "Josie, then." As evening approached, Cole guided the raft toward a small island of higher ground where a cluster of mesquite trees stood above the waterline. "We'll need to make camp for the night," he explained. "Too dangerous to navigate after dark." He helped her off the raft, steadying her when her legs, stiff from sitting, threatened to give way. Then he secured the raft and began to gather what dry wood he could find. "You've done this before," Josie observed as he efficiently built a small fire. "Been on my own a long time," he replied, striking a match. "You learn what needs doing." In the growing firelight, Josie studied her rescuer more carefully. He was older than she'd first thought, perhaps 30, with lines at the corners of his eyes that spoke of years in the sun. His hands were calloused, his movements economical, but there was a gentleness to him that belied his rugged appearance. "Where are you from, Mr. Vickers?" "Cole," he insisted. "Texas originally, been drifting through the territories since the war ended. You fought." He nodded, his expression closing slightly. "Confederate cavalry. Last 2 years of the war," Josie knew better than to press. Many veterans preferred not to speak of their experiences. "And now," drive cattle mostly, was headed to a ranch north of here when the storm hit. He offered her more jerky and a tin cup of coffee he'd brewed over the fire. "You should try to rest. We'll reach the camp by midday tomorrow if the current cooperates." Josie accepted the food and drink gratefully, but rest seemed impossible. "I keep seeing my house breaking apart," she admitted. "Everything I owned was in there." Cole regarded her across the fire. "I've got a blanket in my pack. It's mostly dry. You can have it." "I couldn't take your I insist," he said firmly, retrieving the rolled wool blanket and handing it to her. "I've slept worse places with less comfort." Josie accepted the blanket, wrapping it around her shoulders. It smelled of horse and leather and man, not unpleasant, just different. "Thank you." As she settled onto a patch of relatively dry ground, Cole remained by the fire, his profile etched in gold and shadow. There was something comforting about his presence, a steadiness that made Josie feel safe for the first time in days. "Cole," she said softly, "why did you do it? Risk yourself to check for survivors?" He was quiet for so long that Josie thought he might not answer. Then he spoke, his voice low. "Because no one did it for my family. Flash flood in '67, I was away, came back to nothing." The simple words carried such weight that Josie felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm sorry." "It was a long time ago," he said, poking at the fire with a stick. "Get some rest, Josie. Tomorrow will be another long day." Despite her exhaustion, sleep came fitfully to Josie. Each time she dozed off, she jerked awake, convinced she was back on her roof with the waters rising. Each time her eyes found Cole, still sitting by the fire, keeping watch, and she would drift off again. Dawn brought with it an eerie silence. The constant rush of water remained, but the birds had returned, their songs creating an incongruous backdrop to the devastation below. Josie sat up, wincing at her stiff muscles. Cole was already awake, brewing more coffee over a rekindled fire. "Morning," he said, handing her a cup. "How do you feel?" "Alive," she replied honestly. "Thanks to you." He acknowledged this with a nod, then began packing up their makeshift camp. Currents slowed some, should make for easier going. As they prepared to leave, Josie noticed Cole studying the water with a frown. "What is it?" "Water's dropping," he said. "Not much, but it's a start." Hope fluttered in Josie's chest. "That's good, isn't it? It means we can reach more places," he replied. "There might be others stranded who need help." "You want to keep looking," she realized. It wasn't a question. Cole met her eyes. "I need to get you to the relief camp. You need proper food, dry clothes. And then you'll go back out," she said, understanding his unspoken intention. He nodded once. "If I can help others, I have to try." Josie straightened her shoulders. "Then I'm coming with you." Cole's surprise was evident. "Mrs. Novak, Josie, you've been through enough already. So have others," she countered. "I may have lost my home, but I still have my strength. If we can help someone else, I want to do it." For a long moment, Cole studied her face as if searching for something. Whatever he saw there must have satisfied him because he finally nodded. "All right, but we get supplies at the camp first, and if it gets too dangerous, you go back. Deal?" "Deal," Josie agreed, surprising herself with her own determination. They boarded the raft once more, Cole helping Josie onto the wooden platform before untying the mooring rope. As he pulled them back into the main current, Josie noticed him scanning the flooded landscape with methodical attention. "What are you looking for?" she asked. "Signs," he replied. "Cloth hanging from windows, smoke. Anything that might mean someone's alive and waiting for help." Josie began to look as well, her eyes straining to detect anything unusual amidst the brown water and debris. They moved slowly upstream, Cole expertly navigating the raft around obstacles. Around mid-morning, they approached a small cluster of buildings, a trading post, and a few outbuildings that stood on slightly higher ground. While still surrounded by water, the main structure remained largely intact. "Crowley's post," Josie identified it. "Mr. Crowley and his wife live above the store." Cole angled the raft toward the building. As they drew closer, Josie spotted movement at an upstairs window, a face, then a hand waving frantically. "There," she cried, pointing. "Someone's there." Cole redoubled his efforts, poling against the current with powerful strokes. When they reached the building, an elderly man leaned out of the window. "Praise the Lord," he called down. "We thought everyone had forgotten about us." "We're here to help, Mr. Crowley," Josie called back. "Is Mrs. Crowley with you? She is, but she's poorly, the old man replied. Been without her medicine for days now. Cole maneuvered the raft alongside the building where a narrow ledge offered some purchase. I'll go up and help them down, he told Josie. Keep the raft steady. With remarkable agility, Cole climbed from the raft to the ledge, then found handholds on the rough wooden siding to pull himself up to the window. Josie watched anxiously as he disappeared inside, her heart pounding with a mixture of concern for the Crowleys and admiration for Cole's selfless actions. Several tense minutes passed before Cole appeared at the window again. Mrs. Crowley can't climb down, he called to Josie. I'm going to lower her with a rope. Be ready to help her onto the raft. I will, Josie promised, positioning herself to receive the older woman. Cole disappeared again, and moments later, a rope fashioned from bedsheets appeared with Mrs. Crowley secured in a makeshift harness. The elderly woman was pale and trembling, but she managed a weak smile as Cole carefully lowered her down to where Josie waited. Easy now, Josie murmured, helping the frail woman onto the raft. I've got you, Mrs. Crowley, once Mrs. Crowley was safely aboard. Mr. Crowley followed, climbing down with Cole's assistance. The old man clutched a small wooden box to his chest, clearly his most valued possessions. Thank you, young man, he said to Cole, his voice thick with emotion. We've been up there 5 days now. Martha's heart medicine ran out yesterday, Cole nodded gravely. We're headed to the relief camp. They'll have a doctor there. As they pushed away from the trading post, Josie helped Mrs. Crowley get comfortable, wrapping her in Cole's blanket. The older woman patted Josie's hand gratefully. Such a blessing, she murmured, to see a familiar face. Josie smiled, though her heart ached at the woman's fragile condition. Just rest now, Mrs. Crowley. We'll get you help soon. Mr. Crowley turned to Cole. Any news of the town? Our son works at the livery. Eastern side of Nogales is mostly intact, Cole replied. Can't say about the livery, but many people made it to high ground in time. The old man nodded, hope and worry warring in his weathered face. We've weathered floods before, but nothing like this at all. As Cole guided the raft downstream toward the relief camp, Josie noticed him watching her interact with the Crowleys. There was something like approval in his gaze that made her feel warm despite her damp clothes. The sun climbed higher, burning away the morning mist and revealing the full extent of the flood's devastation. What had once been a verdant valley was now a vast inland sea, with only the tallest trees and structures visible above the murky water. Around noon, they spotted their destination, a collection of tents and wagons on a hillside overlooking the flooded valley. Smoke rose from cooking fires, and people moved about with purpose. As they approached the shore, several men waded out to help guide the raft in. Got survivors. Cole called, and immediately medical personnel appeared to assist Mrs. Crowley. As they helped the elderly couple ashore, a military officer approached, clipboard in hand. Name and property location, he asked briskly. Martha and Elias Crowley, Crowley's trading post, Mr. Crowley replied, still clutching his wooden box. My wife needs a doctor right away, heart condition. The officer nodded and directed them toward a medical tent, then he turned to Josie. And you, madam, Josie Novak. My farm was about 3 miles south of town along the river. The officer made a note. Anyone else at your property? No, sir. I've been alone since my husband passed last winter, he nodded again. We're organizing shelter assignments. For now, you can get some hot food at the mess tent and dry clothes from the supply wagon. As the officer moved away, Cole secured the raft and joined Josie. You should rest, he said. Get something warm inside you. Josie shook her head. We had a deal. I'm coming back out with you after we get supplies. Cole studied her for a moment, then nodded. Let's get what we need then. More people could be out there waiting. They made their way through the camp, where Josie was struck by the organized chaos. The army had clearly taken charge, with soldiers directing refugees to different areas for food, medical attention, or shelter assignments. Civilians moved about in a daze. many still wearing the clothes they'd escaped in. Children cried, adults spoke in hushed voices, and everywhere was the sense of lives interrupted. At the supply tent, they were given blankets, jerky, hardtack, and a bag of coffee. The quartermaster, a gruff sergeant, raised an eyebrow when Cole explained they were going back out to search for survivors. "Most folks are just trying to figure out what to do next," he commented, handing over 2 canteens of fresh water. "Not many volunteering to go back into that mess." "We salvage what we can," Cole replied simply. "People matter more than things," the sergeant nodded slowly. "Admirable, watch yourselves out there. Current's treacherous and there's all manner of debris floating around." Armed with fresh supplies and dry clothing, they returned to the raft. Several onlookers watched with curiosity as Cole helped Josie aboard and prepared to push off. "You're going back out there," a woman called from shore. "Why?" Josie turned to her. "Because someone came for me when I needed help. Others might still be waiting." The woman fell silent, but another voice rose from the crowd. "The Miller family. They live in that stone house near the bend. No one's seen them." "The Winslow children," added another. "Their father took them to their grandmother's farm last week. That's right in the flood path." Suddenly, they had a list of names and locations people unaccounted for who might still be alive, waiting for rescue. Cole jotted them down in a small notebook he carried, nodding his thanks to each person who spoke up. As they pulled away from shore, Josie felt a strange mix of trepidation and purpose. She had lost everything, yet somehow found meaning in this unexpected mission. She glanced at Cole, who stood at the rear of the raft, guiding them with steady, powerful strokes. In just a day, this stranger had come to represent safety and hope in a world turned upside down. "You didn't have to come back out," he said, catching her gaze. "Most would have stayed where it's safe." "I'm not most people," she replied. "And I know what it's like to wait, wondering if help will come." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "No, you certainly aren't most people, Josie Novak." They headed first for the Miller place, a stone house built on a slight rise that might have spared it the worst of the flooding. As they approached, Josie's heart sank. While the structure still stood, water reached halfway up the first-floor windows. "Hello," Cole called, his voice carrying across the water. "Anyone here, Miller family?" For a long moment there was no response. Then faintly came an answering call. "Here." "We're up here." At an upstairs window, a face appeared, a middle-aged man with a beard waving frantically. "How many with you?" Cole shouted as he maneuvered the raft closer. "For my wife, mother, and son," Cole nodded to Josie. "Same as before, I'll go up and help them down one by one." The rescue proceeded much as it had with the Crowleys, though this time Josie felt more confident in her role. She helped Mrs. Miller, a stout woman in her 40s, onto the raft, then the elderly grandmother, and finally 12-year-old Timothy, whose eyes were wide with a mixture of fear and excitement. "We killed and ate the last of our chickens yesterday," Mr. Miller explained as Cole helped him down. "Didn't know how much longer we could hold out." "You're safe now," Josie assured him, offering water to the boy, who drank greedily. With the Miller family aboard, the raft rode lower in the water, making progress slower. Cole worked harder at the pole, his muscles straining visibly through his shirt as he guided them downstream toward the camp. "Been all over these parts," Mr. Miller said, watching the submerged landscape. "Never seen anything like this. It'll take years to recover." "We'll rebuild, Mrs. Miller said firmly, "as long as we have each other." Josie felt a pang at those words. Who did she have? Her parents were long dead, her husband gone. What would she rebuild for? As if sensing her thoughts, Cole caught her eye. "One day at a time," he reminded her softly. They delivered the Millers safely to the relief camp, where their arrival caused a stir of excitement. News that people were being rescued spread quickly, and more volunteers came forward with names and locations of missing neighbors. "We can't possibly check all these places before dark," Josie said, looking at Cole's growing list. "No," he agreed, "but we can try for a few more. The Winslow farm isn't far from here." They set out again, this time with additional supplies provided by grateful camp organizers. The afternoon sun beat down on them, turning the flooded valley into a steaming mirror that reflected the cloudless sky. Josie's skin felt tender from sunburn, but she didn't complain. Compared to what others were facing, a sunburn was nothing. They found no one at the Winslow farm, just an empty house with the doors left open, suggesting the family had evacuated in time. At the next property, a small ranch owned by a man named Perez, they discovered the owner and his two sons perched on the roof of their barn, the house completely submerged. Gracias a Dios. The older man cried when he saw them. We thought we would die here. As they helped the Perez family aboard, Josie noticed the sun beginning its westward descent. We should head back soon, she said quietly to Cole. It'll be dark in a couple of hours. Cole nodded, though she could see the reluctance in his eyes. One more, he said. There's a homestead just over that rise that was on our list. The homestead proved to be abandoned, but as they turned to head back to camp, they heard a faint cry carried on the wind. Did you hear that? Josie asked, straining to listen. Cole nodded, already changing their course. Sounded like it came from those cottonwoods. They pulled toward a small grove of trees that stood like islands in the flood. As they drew closer, the cry came again, distinctly a child's voice. Hello, Cole called. Where are you? Here, came the response. In the tree, please help us. In the largest cottonwood, clinging to the upper branches, were two children, a girl of about 10 and a boy slightly younger. Their clothes were torn, their faces streaked with dirt and tears. Where are your parents? Josie called as Cole maneuvered the raft beneath the tree. Gone, the girl sobbed. The water took them. We climbed as high as we could. Josie's heart constricted at the tragedy in those simple words. We're going to get you down, she promised. Just hold on a little longer. Cole positioned the raft directly under the lowest branch where the children huddled. I'll climb up, he told Josie. You be ready to receive them. With the agility that still surprised her, Cole pulled himself up into the tree. The children shrank back at first, but his gentle voice soon coaxed them toward him. One by one, he lowered them down to Josie's waiting arms, first the boy, small and trembling, then the girl, whose face was set in a mask of premature adulthood. What are your names? Josie asked as she wrapped blankets around their thin shoulders. I'm Sarah Anderson, the girl replied. This is my brother, William. Our pa was taking us to our aunt's house when the water came. How long have you been in that tree? Cole asked, rejoining them on the raft. 3 days, I think, Sarah answered, her voice small. We had some biscuits Pa gave us before. She trailed off, unable to finish. You're very brave, Josie told her, pulling both children close. Both of you, and you're safe now. As they headed back toward camp, the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the water. The children huddled against Josie, drawing comfort from her presence. She found herself humming softly, an old lullaby her mother had sung to her, and gradually felt the tension leave their small bodies. Cole watched this from his position at the rear of the raft, his face softened by something that might have been admiration. You're good with them, he said quietly when the children had dozed off. I always wanted children, Josie admitted. Thomas and I, we tried, but it never happened. Cole nodded, understanding in his eyes. Sometimes life doesn't give us what we plan for. No, she agreed, looking down at the sleeping children. Sometimes it gives us something else entirely. They reached camp as twilight deepened into night. The Anderson children were immediately taken to the medical tent, where a search began for their aunt or any other relatives who might have survived. You should both get some proper rest, the Army captain told Cole and Josie as they reported on their day's rescues. You've done more than anyone could expect. Exhaustion washed over Josie as the adrenaline of the day faded. Her muscles ached, her skin burned from sun exposure, and the emotional weight of all she'd witnessed pressed down on her. Yet when she looked at Cole, she saw the same determination that she felt. We'll go out again tomorrow, he said, not a question but a statement of fact. Yes, she agreed. We will. They were assigned a small tent to share an arrangement that might have scandalized Josie under normal circumstances, but now seemed trivial compared to the life and death situations they'd faced together. Inside the canvas shelter, Cole spread his bedroll on one side, leaving the other for Josie. "I'll step out while you change," he said, handing her a set of dry clothes that had been provided by camp organizers. When he returned, Josie was already wrapped in her blanket, her damp hair loose around her shoulders. Cole settled on his bedroll, removing only his boots before stretching out. In the dim light filtering through the canvas, Josie studied his profile, the strong jaw, the straight nose, the furrow between his brows that seemed permanent. "Cole," she said softly. Thank you for saving me, for everything." He turned his head to look at her, his blue eyes serious in the semi-darkness. "You don't need to thank me, Josie. Anyone would have done the same." "No," she disagreed. "They wouldn't have. Most would have taken me to safety and been done with it. You went back out. You're still going back out." Cole was quiet for a long moment. "When I lost my family," he finally said, "I wasn't there to help them. I've carried that with me for a long time, too long maybe." Josie's heart ached for him. "It wasn't your fault." "Maybe not. But what we're doing now, this feels right. Like maybe it balances the scales somehow." Impulsively, Josie reached across the space between them and took his hand. His fingers were calloused against hers, strong and warm. "You're a good man, Cole Vickers." He didn't pull away, but she felt a slight tension in his hand. "You should sleep," he said softly. "Tomorrow will be another long day." Josie withdrew her hand, though reluctantly. "Good night, Cole." "Good night, Josie." Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded her for some time. She was acutely aware of Cole's presence just a few feet away, his steady breathing a comforting rhythm in the darkness. When sleep finally claimed her, she dreamed not of the flood or her lost home, but of blue eyes and strong hands guiding her to safety. The next 3 days fell into a pattern. They would rise at dawn, collect supplies, and head out on the raft to check locations where people might be stranded. Each day, the waters receded a little more, revealing the muddy devastation beneath, but also making it easier to reach previously inaccessible areas. They found survivors each day, a family who had taken refuge in their attic, an elderly couple who had climbed onto their roof, a pregnant woman who had gone into labor during the flood and given birth alone in the upper story of her home. The newborn miraculously healthy despite the circumstances. Each rescue strengthened the bond between Josie and Cole. They developed an unspoken language, anticipating each other's needs and movements. He would help someone down, and she would be waiting with water and blankets. She would spot a signal from a distant window, and he would immediately change course. In the evenings, they would return to camp, eat a simple meal, and collapse into exhausted sleep in their shared tent. Sometimes they would talk quietly before sleep claimed them, Cole sharing stories of his travels through the territories, Josie speaking of her life with Thomas and their dreams for the future. Other nights they were too tired for words, but the silence between them was comfortable, filled with mutual understanding. On the 4th day, as they guided their raft back toward camp after rescuing an elderly trapper who had been stranded in his cabin, Cole suddenly stopped poling. "What is it?" Josie asked, alarmed by the sudden change in his demeanor. "Listen," he said quietly. Josie strained her ears. At first she heard nothing unusual, just the lap of water against the raft, the distant calls of birds. Then she caught it, a rhythmic splashing, growing louder. "Someone's coming," Cole said, scanning the water ahead. Around a bend in what had once been the river came another raft, smaller than theirs but similarly constructed. Standing on it was a tall man in a wide-brimmed hat, using a long branch as a pole. When he spotted them, he raised a hand in greeting. "Cole Vickers," the man called. "I heard you might be out here playing hero." Cole's face broke into a rare smile. "Daniel Ross," he replied. "Should have known you'd turn up." The man guided his raft alongside theirs. He was younger than Cole, perhaps in his mid-20s, with an open, friendly face and an easy smile. Got word at the Williams Ranch that the river had broken its banks, Daniel explained. Been working my way downstream checking on folks. He tipped his hat to Josie. Madam. This is Josie Novak, Cole introduced her. She's been helping with the rescue efforts. Daniel's eyebrows rose slightly as he glanced between them, but he simply nodded. Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Novak. Any luck today? We found Mr. Jenkins at his hunting cabin, Josie replied. That makes 17 people we've rescued since the flood hit. Daniel whistled low. Impressive. I've only managed to help about half that many. He turned to Cole. The Army's setting up a second relief camp on the north side of the valley. They're bringing in supplies from Tucson. Good, Cole nodded. We've about reached capacity at our camp. As the men discussed the situation, Josie noticed something the way Daniel looked at Cole with obvious respect, almost admiration. It was clear they knew each other well. You two have worked together before. She asked during a lull in their conversation. Daniel grinned. Cole saved my hide during a cattle drive gone wrong 2 years back. Apaches got riled up after some fool cowboys desecrated a burial ground. Cole here not only got us out alive, he managed to make peace with the tribal leaders. He shook his head, never seen anything like it. Cole looked uncomfortable with the praise. It was the right thing to do, that's all. That's what I mean, Daniel said to Josie, always doing the right thing even when it's the hard thing. He clapped Cole on the shoulder. Anyway, I should push on. There's a homestead about a mile downstream I want to check before dark. We've already been there, Cole told him. Hanson's evacuated in time, no one there. Daniel nodded his thanks for the information. I'll head back to the north camp then. You two be careful out here. He tipped his hat again to Josie. Madam, it was a pleasure. Hope to see you both when this is all over. As Daniel pulled away, Josie turned to Cole. He thinks highly of you. Cole shrugged, uncomfortable with the observation. Daniel's a good man. Tends to see the best in people. Or perhaps he sees you clearly, Josie suggested. Cole didn't respond, but focused on guiding their raft back into the current. As they moved along, Josie found herself watching him the way his muscles worked as he manipulated the pole, the focused set of his jaw, the occasional softening of his expression when he glanced her way. It occurred to her, with a jolt of surprise, that she was coming to care for this quiet, steadfast man. In the midst of losing everything she had built, she had found something unexpected, a connection that went beyond their shared mission. When they reached camp that evening, they found it buzzing with activity. Army wagons had arrived with fresh supplies, and soldiers were constructing more permanent shelters to replace the tents. Looks like they're settling in for the long haul, Josie observed as they secured their raft. Rebuilding takes time, Cole replied. Especially after something like this, the officer in charge, Captain Harlow, approached them as they made their way into camp. Vickers, Mrs. Novak, he greeted them. Good work today. I wanted to let you know we've started mapping the damage. Engineers are saying it might be several weeks before some areas are accessible again. What about the people who lost their homes? Josie asked. Where will they go? The Army's requisitioned land on the eastern ridge, Harlow explained. We'll be setting up a temporary settlement there. Those who want to rebuild can apply for assistance from the territorial government. Josie nodded, though the words temporary settlement filled her with unease. She had no home to return to, no clear path forward. There's another matter, the captain continued. We're organizing teams to salvage what can be recovered from the flooded areas. Given your experience on the water, Vickers, I'd like you to lead one of those teams. Cole considered this. How long? At least through the end of the month. Pays fare $5 a day plus rations. Josie felt a strange twist in her stomach. The end of the month was weeks away. Would Cole stay that long, and what would she do in the meantime? I'll do it, Cole decided. On one condition, Mrs. Novak partners with me if she's willing. She knows the area better than I do, and she's proven herself capable. The captain looked surprised but nodded. If the lady agrees, I have no objection. Same pay for both of you. Josie was touched by Cole's insistence on including her. I agree, she said. I want to help. After the captain left, Josie turned to Cole. Thank you for that, for including me, he met her eyes directly. You've earned it. Besides, I've come to, he hesitated, seeming to search for the right words. I've come to value your company. It wasn't a declaration of affection, not exactly, but something in his tone made Josie's heart beat faster. I've come to value yours as well, she replied softly. That evening, as they sat by one of the communal fires eating their supper, Sarah Anderson, the girl they had rescued from the cottonwood tree, found them. She looked better than she had days before, clean, properly clothed, though her eyes still held shadows of her ordeal. Mrs. Novak, she said shyly. Mr. Vickers, Sarah, Josie smiled warmly. How are you and William doing? Better, madam. They found our aunt. She's here in the camp. She's going to take care of us now. The girl twisted her hands nervously. I wanted to thank you both for saving us. You're very welcome, Cole said gently. You were brave to keep your brother safe for so long. Sarah's chin trembled slightly. Pa always said I was the responsible one. Her voice caught on the word pa, and Josie instinctively reached out to pull the child into an embrace. Your father would be very proud of you, she murmured, stroking Sarah's hair. Very proud indeed. When Sarah had composed herself and returned to her aunt, Josie found Cole watching her with an unreadable expression. What? She asked self-consciously. You should have children, Josie, he said quietly. You'd be a wonderful mother. The simple statement, delivered with such certainty, brought unexpected tears to her eyes. Maybe someday, she managed to say, though the prospect seemed distant and unlikely. Cole nodded, his gaze still on her face. Someday, he echoed, and something in the way he said it made her wonder if he was thinking of futures neither of them had articulated. The salvage work began the next day. With the floodwaters continuing to recede, they were able to reach areas that had been completely submerged. The devastation was sobering. Buildings collapsed or washed from their foundations. Fields of crops turned to mud, livestock carcasses tangled in debris. Yet amid the destruction, there were things to be saved. Josie and Cole recovered furniture, tools, family Bibles, photographs, jewelry boxes, anything that might help the survivors rebuild not just their homes but their sense of identity and connection to the past. They worked from dawn until dusk, returning to camp each night mud-splattered and exhausted, but with the satisfaction of having made a difference, however small. The raft that had been their means of rescue became their workboat, stacked daily with salvaged items to be returned to their owners. As the days passed, Josie began to notice a change in the way Cole interacted with her. His initial reserve had softened. He smiled more readily, sought her opinion on decisions, and occasionally let his hand rest on her shoulder or the small of her back, brief touches that nonetheless sent warmth spreading through her. For her part, Josie found herself thinking of Cole at odd moments, wondering what he would think of something she saw, anticipating his reaction to a discovery, taking pleasure in his rare, full smiles. She told herself it was natural, given the intensity of their shared experiences, but in quiet moments she acknowledged the truth. She was falling in love with Cole Vickers. The realization should have frightened her. It had been barely a year since Thomas died, and here she was, developing feelings for another man. Yet somehow it felt right, as though the flood had washed away not just her physical possessions, but also the constraints of her former life, leaving her free to build something new. 2 weeks into their salvage work, they ventured to what remained of Josie's farm. She had been both dreading and anticipating this moment, wanting to see what might be recovered, but fearing the finality of confronting her loss. As they poled the raft over what had once been her fields, Josie struggled to reconcile this muddy wasteland with the home she had loved. The house was still partially standing, though it listed dangerously to one side, its foundation undermined by the floodwaters. We should check the upper floor, Cole suggested gently. There might be things worth saving. Josie nodded, not trusting herself to speak. They secured the raft to what remained of her porch and carefully made their way into the structure. The lower floor was a lost furniture overturned and coated in mud, floorboards buckled, walls stained with a brown line showing how high the water had reached. The stairs creaked ominously under their weight as they climbed to the second floor. Here, the damage was less severe. Josie's bedroom, while damp from leaks in the roof, had escaped the worst of the flooding. She moved through the space slowly, touching familiar objects the quilt her mother had made, now musty but salvageable, the daguerreotype of her parents on their wedding day, Thomas's pocket watch still in its place on the bedside table. "This," she said, picking up the watch. "This was my husband's, his father's before him." She opened the case, revealing the inscription inside. "To time well spent." Cole watched as she carefully placed it in her pocket. "What else matters to you here?" he asked. Josie looked around, trying to separate sentiment from practicality. "The quilt, the photographs, my mother's silver hairbrush, Thomas's letters are in that box." She pointed to a small wooden chest on a high shelf. "Everything else, it's just things." As Cole helped her gather these treasures, Josie found herself speaking about her life here, the dreams she and Thomas had shared, the small triumphs and disappointments of homesteading, the gradual understanding that the land was both generous and merciless. "He loved it here," she said as they prepared to leave. "Said the sky was bigger than back in Missouri." "It is at that," Cole agreed, looking out through a broken window at the expanse of blue above the muddy landscape. "I don't know if I can start over here," Josie admitted. "Not alone." Cole turned to her then, his expression serious. "You don't have to decide now, Josie, and you don't have to be alone unless you choose to be." There was something in his voice, a question unasked, a possibility offered that made her heart skip. But before she could respond, a worrying creak from below reminded them of their precarious position. "We should go," Cole said. "This place isn't stable." They made their way carefully back to the raft, Josie's salvaged possessions wrapped in the quilt. As they pulled away, she looked back at the damaged house not with despair, as she had expected, but with something like acceptance. It had been her home, but perhaps it was no longer meant to be. That night in camp, Josie spent time cleaning and drying her recovered items. The watch she polished until it gleamed, winding it carefully and smiling as it began to tick once more. The photographs she placed between pages of a borrowed Bible to dry them flat. The silver hairbrush she cleaned of tarnish, using a paste made from baking soda provided by the camp cook. Cole found her thus engaged when he returned from conferring with Captain Harlow. He sat beside her on the log she was using as a bench, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "How do you feel?" he asked. "After seeing your place today." Josie considered the question. "Sad," she admitted, "but also relieved in a way. Now I know. I can stop wondering and start thinking about what comes next." "And what does come next for Josie Novak?" She set down the hairbrush, turning slightly to face him. "I'm not sure yet. The captain says the army will help people rebuild. I could claim a new homestead plot, maybe further from the river this time." Cole nodded, his eyes on the fire. "That's one option. What about you?" she asked. When the salvage work is done, he was quiet for a long moment. "I hadn't planned that far ahead," he finally said. "Before the flood, I was headed to the Whitman Ranch north of here, had a job offer to break horses for them." "Is that offer still open?" "Probably. The Whitmans are good people. I've worked for them before." Josie felt a pang at the thought of Cole riding away, returning to the life of a drifting cowboy. In just a few weeks, he had become central to her world in ways she hadn't anticipated. "You could still go," she said, trying to keep her voice neutral. "Once things settle here." Cole turned to look at her directly, his blue eyes reflecting the firelight. "I could," he agreed, "or I could find another path." The way he held her gaze made Josie's breath catch. There was meaning in his words beyond their surface simplicity. "What other path might interest you?" she asked softly. Cole's hand moved to cover hers where it rested on the log between them. His calloused palm was warm against her skin. "One that doesn't involve drifting anymore," he said. One that might include roots, a home. Josie's heart pounded so loudly she was certain he must hear it. That would be a significant change for a man used to open horizons. Some changes are worth making, he replied, his voice low and earnest, when the right reason comes along. They sat in silence for a moment, the implications of his words hanging in the air between them. Josie was acutely aware of his hand still covering hers, of the warmth radiating from his body in the cool evening air. "Cole," she began, not entirely sure what she meant to say, but needing to respond to the unspoken question in his statement. Before she could continue, they were interrupted by one of the army sergeants. "Vickers, got a message from the North Camp. They're requesting your help with a salvage operation to borrow some buildings along the creek that are in danger of collapse." Cole reluctantly withdrew his hand from Josie's. "Tell them I'll be there," he told the sergeant. "First light." When they were alone again, the moment had passed, but something had shifted between them, an acknowledgement of possibilities, perhaps. A door left slightly ajar. "I should get some rest if I'm heading north tomorrow," Cole said, standing. "Will you be all right here?" Josie nodded. "I'll help at the medical tent. Dr. Simmons said they could use an extra pair of hands." Cole studied her face for a moment as if memorizing its features. "I'll be back by sundown," he promised. Then, in a gesture that surprised her, he bent down and lightly kissed her forehead. "Good night, Josie." She watched him walk away, her skin tingling where his lips had touched. "Good night," she whispered, though he was too far away to hear. The next day dragged interminably for Josie. She kept herself busy in the medical tent, changing bandages, serving broth to the sick, and reading to an elderly man whose eyes were too weak to make out the print of his Bible. But her thoughts continually strayed to Cole where he was, what he was doing, and most of all, what he had meant by his words the previous night. Was he truly considering settling down, and did he mean with her? The possibility both thrilled and frightened her. She had not expected to find love again so soon after losing Thomas. Yet her feelings for Cole had grown steadily with each passing day. He was different from her late husband, quieter, more self-contained, but there was a depth to him, a steadfast integrity that resonated with something in her own soul. As promised, Cole returned by sundown, looking weary but satisfied. He found Josie helping distribute the evening meal near one of the cooking fires. "How was the North Camp?" she asked as she handed him a tin plate of beans and salt pork. "Organized," he replied. "They're already building permanent structures on the high ground, planning for the future." They sat together to eat, Cole recounting the day's work, the buildings they had managed to stabilize, the items recovered, the families they had helped. Josie listened, content simply to hear his voice after a day without it. When they had finished eating, Cole suggested a walk to stretch their legs after a day of labor. They followed a path that led away from the camp, up a gentle slope that afforded a view of the valley below. In the fading light, the flood's devastation was softened, the muddy wasteland transformed into a silver plain that reflected the first stars appearing in the darkening sky. "It's hard to believe how much has changed in just a few weeks," Josie said as they stood side by side, gazing out at the landscape. "Nature can destroy in minutes what took years to build," Cole agreed, "but it can also create something new where there was nothing before." Josie glanced at him. "That sounds almost philosophical coming from a cowboy." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Even cowboys think about things from time to time." "And what have you been thinking about, Cole Vickers?" He turned to face her fully. "About how sometimes the worst moments in life can lead to the best, about how meeting you in the middle of all this," he gestured toward the flooded valley, "has made me reconsider what I want from life." Josie's pulse quickened. "And what do you want?" Cole took a step closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "For a long time I thought it was freedom, the ability to move on whenever the mood struck, answerable to no one." He shook his head slightly. "But that kind of freedom starts to feel empty after a while. Like you're always searching for something but never finding it." "And now?" Josie barely breathed the question. Now I'm thinking that maybe what I've been looking for was right here all along. Someone who understands what it means to lose everything and still have the courage to start again. His hand came up to gently touch her cheek. Someone like you, Josie. The tenderness in his touch and his words made Josie's eyes fill with tears. Cole, you don't have to say anything, he assured her quickly. I know it soon. You're still grieving Thomas, and we've known each other only a short time. I just wanted you to know that when I think about settling down now, I'm thinking about settling down with you. Josie reached up to cover his hand with hers, pressing it more firmly against her cheek. It is soon, she agreed. And under normal circumstances, I might think it too soon. But these aren't normal circumstances, are they? We've seen each other at our most vulnerable. We've worked side by side through life and death situations. I feel like I know your heart, Cole Vickers, in ways that might have taken years under different conditions. Hope kindled in his eyes. And I care for you, she said softly. More than I thought possible after losing Thomas, different but no less real. Cole's free arms slipped around her waist, drawing her closer. I care for you too, Josie. More than I can say. In the gathering dusk, with the stars beginning to shine overhead and the distant sounds of the camp behind them, Cole lowered his head and kissed her. It was gentle at first, questioning, but when Josie's arms wound around his neck, it deepened into something more urgent, more passionate. When they finally drew apart, both slightly breathless, Josie rested her forehead against his chest. What happens now? She murmured. Cole's hand stroked her hair gently. Now we take things one day at a time, see where this leads us. She looked up at him, warmed by the tenderness in his gaze. And if it leads us to a future together, then we build it, he said simply. Together. They returned to camp hand in hand, aware of curious glances but too wrapped up in their newfound connection to care. That night, as they prepared for sleep in their shared tent, there was a new awareness between them. A sweet tension that made even the most casual touch meaningful. Good night, Josie, Cole said softly from his bedroll. Good night, Cole, she replied, smiling in the darkness. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of continued salvage work, rebuilding efforts and stolen moments together. They told no one officially of their changed relationship, but it was evident to those around them in the way Cole's eyes followed Josie across the camp. In the way she smiled whenever he appeared, in the comfortable synchronicity of their movements as they worked together. Daniel Ross, returning from another rescue mission, noticed it immediately. So, he said to Cole with a knowing grin, found something worth staying in one place for, have you? Cole's gaze drifted to where Josie was helping a group of children plant a small garden on a patch of high ground. Maybe I have, he admitted. About time. Daniel clapped him on the shoulder. You deserve some happiness, my friend. As the floodwaters continued to recede, the Army's focus shifted from immediate relief to long-term recovery. Land was surveyed, damage assessed, and plans made for rebuilding. Those whose property was deemed salvageable received assistance returning to their homes. Those whose land was too badly damaged were offered alternate plots further from the river. Josie fell into the latter category. Captain Harlow showed her a map one afternoon, pointing out a parcel on the eastern ridge that had been allocated for her use. Good soil, he told her. Higher elevation means less flood risk. You can claim it under the Homestead Act, same as your previous property. Josie studied the map, noting the location close enough to the rebuilt town to be convenient, far enough away to offer privacy. It looks promising, she said, but I'd need to see it before deciding. Of course, the captain agreed. Vickers can take you up there tomorrow if you like. Cole did exactly that the following morning. They rode borrowed horses up to the ridge, following a trail that wound through stands of pine and juniper. The land, when they reached it, exceeded Josie's expectations. 20 acres of gently rolling terrain with a natural spring at its center and views that stretched for miles. It's beautiful, she said, dismounting to examine the soil. Better than my old place in many ways. Cole watched her from horseback, his expression thoughtful. You could build a good life here, she looked up at him. Could you build a life here, I mean? He swung down from his horse, coming to stand beside her. I could build a life anywhere, Josie, if you were part of it. The simple declaration made her heart swell. Are you proposing, Cole Vickers? His eyes crinkled at the corners. Would you say yes if I was? Josie pretended to consider, though she already knew her answer. I might, she teased, if you asked properly. Cole's expression grew serious. He took her hands in his blue eyes intent on her face. Josie Novak, I love you. I know it's fast and some might say foolish, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Will you marry me? Build a home with me on this land, face whatever comes next together. Tears sprang to Josie's eyes, but they were tears of joy, not sorrow. Yes, she said without hesitation. Yes to all of it. Cole's face broke into a smile of such unguarded happiness that it took Josie's breath away. He pulled her into his arms, lifting her off her feet in an exuberant embrace before setting her down and kissing her thoroughly. When? He asked when they finally broke apart. How soon can you be ready? Josie laughed at his eagerness. There's a circuit preacher due at the camp next week. Would that be soon enough for you, Mr. Vickers? It'll have to do, he agreed, his eyes twinkling. Though I'd marry you this minute if we could find someone to do it. They returned to camp with their news, which was met with congratulations and some good-natured teasing about whirlwind romances. Sarah Anderson, now somewhat recovered from her ordeal, was particularly delighted. Will you live in a real house? She asked Josie. With a garden and everything. Eventually, Josie told her. First we'll need to build it, but yes, there will definitely be a garden. The week leading up to the preacher's arrival was filled with preparations. The women in camp helped Josie fashion a simple wedding dress from fabric donated by the Army quartermaster. Cole, with Daniel's help, began clearing the land for their future home, starting with a one-room cabin that would shelter them until a proper house could be built. The wedding itself was a community affair. Everyone in the camp attended, creating an impromptu celebration that brought light and joy to what had been a place of hardship. Wildflowers decorated the simple wooden altar. Someone produced a fiddle and music filled the air. For a few hours, the aftermath of the flood was forgotten as people joined together to celebrate new beginnings. Josie would always remember the look on Cole's face as she walked toward him, the way his eyes never left hers as they spoke their vows, the gentle strength of his hands as he placed a simple gold band, salvaged, fittingly, from the floodwaters on her finger. I, Cole, take you, Josie, to be my wife, he said, his voice steady and sure. To have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death parts us. When Josie repeated the vows, her voice trembled slightly, but her heart was certain. This man who had come to her rescue when she needed it most, who had worked beside her through the worst disaster she had ever faced, who had shown her that life could begin anew even after tremendous loss, this man was her future. I now pronounce you man and wife, the preacher declared. What God has joined together, let no man put asunder. Cole's kiss was both tender and possessive, a promise of all that was to come. The cheers of the assembled community washed over them, a blessing more meaningful than any formal ceremony could have provided. That night, as husband and wife, they slept beneath the stars on the land that would become their home. Cole had constructed a simple lean-to against a large pine tree, furnished with blankets and a small fire for warmth and light. It was primitive but perfect, the first night of their life together. Are you happy, Mrs. Vickers? Cole asked as they lay side by side, gazing up at the star-filled sky. Josie turned to him, taking in the beloved features of his face in the firelight. Happier than I ever thought I could be again, she said truthfully. Are you happy, Mr. Vickers? His arm tightened around her, drawing her closer against his side. More than I deserve to be, he murmured before kissing her with a passion that left no doubt of his feelings. In the weeks and months that followed, they built their life together piece by piece. The one-room cabin gave way to a proper house, constructed with help from neighbors and friends. Cole, using skills he had acquired in his years of travel, proved adept at carpentry and stonework. Josie planted a garden that flourished in the rich soil, started a small flock of chickens, and even acquired a milk cow named Buttercup. Cole, true to his word, gave up drifting. He took occasional work breaking horses for nearby ranches, but always returned home at day's end. Together, they accumulated the necessities of a homestead: tools, furniture, livestock. Some they purchased with their savings from the salvage work. Others came as wedding gifts or through bartering with neighbors. A year after the flood, Nogales had been largely rebuilt. The river had returned to its usual course, though its banks had been reinforced to prevent future disasters. New buildings stood where old ones had been swept away. Fields once again produced crops. Life had returned to a semblance of normality. On the anniversary of the day Cole had found Josie stranded on her roof, they sat on the porch of their completed home, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Josie's head rested on Cole's shoulder, her hand absently stroking her slightly rounded belly, the first visible sign of the child they had created together. "A penny for your thoughts," Cole said, his arm warm around her waist. Josie smiled, looking out over their thriving homestead. "I was thinking about what you said that first day when we were leaving my old house. We salvage what we can remember," Cole nodded, his cheek against her hair. "I remember. I didn't understand then what you meant," she continued. "I thought you were just talking about physical things. But it was more than that, wasn't it? It was about salvaging hope, purpose, the capacity to love again." Cole turned slightly to look at her, his blue eyes soft with emotion. "All of that," he agreed, "and finding treasure amid the wreckage." She reached up to touch his face, tracing the line of his jaw with gentle fingers. "You were my treasure, Cole Vickers, the blessing I never expected in the midst of disaster." He captured her hand, bringing it to his lips to kiss her palm. "And you were mine, Josie. The reason I finally stopped drifting and found my way home." As darkness settled over the land, they remained on the porch, wrapped in each other's arms, grateful for the flood that had destroyed and then, in its way, created, washing away old barriers and carrying them, against all odds, into each other's lives. 5 years later, the Vickers homestead had grown into one of the most prosperous in the area. The house had been expanded to accommodate their growing family. First Thomas, named for Josie's first husband in a gesture of respect for the past. Then Emma, with her father's blue eyes and her mother's determination. A third child was on the way, turning Josie's steps slower and her smile even more radiant as summer approached. Cole had established himself as a respected horse trainer, with buyers coming from as far as Tucson and Santa Fe to purchase his carefully bred and trained animals. Josie managed the household and a thriving vegetable garden, selling surplus produce in town on market days. On a warm June evening, they hosted a gathering to celebrate the completion of their new barn. Neighbors from miles around attended, including Daniel Ross and his wife Clara, Sarah and William Anderson with their aunt and uncle, and many others who had been part of that fateful time after the flood. As twilight descended and lanterns were lit, casting a golden glow over the gathering, Daniel called for attention. Raising his glass, he looked directly at Cole and Josie, who stood together with Thomas clinging to his father's leg and Emma perched on Cole's hip. "To Cole and Josie Vickers," Daniel proposed, "who showed us all what it means to salvage what truly matters from disaster: courage, hope, and love. To Cole and Josie." The crowd echoed, glasses raised. Cole's arm tightened around Josie's shoulders as he pressed a kiss to her temple. "Happy," he murmured for her ears alone. Josie looked up at him, at the man who had pulled a makeshift raft through floodwaters to save her, who had taught her that loss wasn't the end of the story but sometimes just the beginning of a new chapter. "Completely," she whispered back. "Are you?" Cole's smile, as it had been from the first time she saw it, was like the sun breaking through clouds, rare and warming and true. "More than I ever dreamed possible," he assured her. and more with each passing day. As the celebration continued around them, with music and laughter and the sweet promise of summer in the air, Josie reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From the terror of being stranded in a flood to the joy of creating a life together, from despair to hope, from loss to love, it had been a path neither of them could have anticipated. "We salvage what we can," Cole had told her that first day. And they had salvaged not just physical possessions, but something far more valuable: the chance to build a future together, stronger and more beautiful for having weathered the storm.